Friday is nice. I live,
Friday night.
I live like, the funny thing is, that's not funny, but when I was going in school, I didn't understand what the big deal of TGIF is.
Oh,
Who cares? Friday is Friday. What's the deal?
Yeah.
Once you start working,
right.
oh yeah, that's all you look forward to is Friday.
Maybe also the hump day. Because then you're like, I don't know. For me personally, like when I worked at UPS, I was like, if I can
You
get
worked
through
at
Wednesday,
UPS?
2 years, yeah.
Oh man,
I was
that's
like,
been hard work.
yeah, if you can get through Wednesday or Thursday, you're like, I'm almost, home.
Did you drive?
No, I unloaded boxes like all day long.
The UPS drivers are doing pretty good.
Mm.
100 and I think 30K or something. I know it's a lot of work for them, but still.
His brother still work UPS.
Yes.
너무 힘들대요. Very hard.
Very hard.
Yeah.
But 돈은 괜찮아요.
돈 괜찮아요, 저거?
Driver, yeah.
For drivers, yeah.
Yeah.
Not for actually package handlers. It's safer than drivers because like for drivers, if you get sick, so they're more strict on sick days and then how often you can get off. You know what I mean? So if you happen to get like the flu for like a month, you're screwed.
Yeah, it's good.
Whereas
But
like
it's
if you're a
not,
box right.
it's not like an easy job, like because
Mm.
I saw a documentary. They had to deliver like 150 boxes per day.
Mm. Mm.
To the week, your entire day was like delivering.
The boxes aren't always nice and
Yeah.
nicely sized. You have
No.
some weird boxes and
Yeah,
long
right.
boxes. And,
And then you gotta
People draw.
some houses you gotta climb upstairs.
Right.
yeah, no, it's bad.
You gotta watch out for the dogs,
The other thing is real. There's a pit bull outside.
Yeah.
all kinds. So it's not like at easy. People saying like they overpaid, but I don't think they overpaid. Plus the UPS trucks, they don't have AC.
Yeah.
The point is because you open it so much, you're just letting all the cold air out.
Yeah. I mean, some of them do now, but
So I saw this viral video. I think it was like in Arizona or something.
Oh,
The
man.
UPS driver was so hot, the owner allowed him to jump into the pool. So with his clothes on, he jumped. He just got out, but like it's so hot, dried up in no time.
but that's life.
I heard in different
Yeah.
states, Korea.
That's life.
I heard in different states they give water to the driver because it's so hot. Here it's not that hot. It's okay, but
You
different-
think people leaving out like a water pitcher?
no,
or-
like when they ring the doorbell, like they quickly give them some water.
Yeah.
It's really, really hot.
It's hospitality.
That's Southern hospitality.
I
It's
heard,
not really southern, but
자기는 주면 먹을 거예요? If you
no, because I don't know what they laced with that.
just water
You never know.
or a bottle.
It's
Bottle,
depending
I'll
on
consider a
size.
bottle.
Yeah, I
I
don't
know.
think they're gonna. Oh, you
No, you never know. These guys are crazy. Just to be funny. You know, like, do you remember when Vine went viral? There were people who were like, do it for the Vine. People used to like really dumb stuff there. You know what I mean?
I heard in Korea though, because I mentioned this to my wife. She said in Korea, the delivery people, it's really a lot of work, and I heard they all give them drinks, all
Right.
give them like. Because in Korea, you actually have to climb up the
Right.
lot of stairs. There's not much.
And the culture is like that too.
The
Kind of.
culture like that, yeah.
It's really hilly.
Yes.
A lot of stairs. They don't really have elevator in older buildings.
Mm.
Here too. In Brooklyn, when we used to live there, it was the third floor. We used to walk up. You could tell that the UPS person is delivering something because you would hear him like gasping for breath. It's like, oh, UPS guy's here.
어떻게?
Yeah.
That's part of the job, though.
Those brownstone buildings.
돈
don't
주대.
have-
너무 힘들 것 같아.
It's good pay though.
Hey, union,
Pension.
and yeah.
제임스 할 수 있을 것 같아요?
Pension is really good. I heard. Pension is very.
몸이 근데 너무 힘들잖아.
Pension 진짜 좋아요. Pension. Right now, pension is
If
the
you have a
best.
pension, you could just be an officer, like a police officer. 20 years or something. Did you get a pension?
No, I don't think it is.
But you can get shot within those 20 years. You know what I mean?
Very unlikely.
Less. You're
Extremely
You're more likely to
unlikely.
survive for UPS driver.
I mean, even in New York City, it's unlikely. I mean, even UPS drivers get shot. Very rarely. It's not happening.
Hey, if I'm a UPS driver, you don't make packages? Take it all.
Right.
Take them.
The thing is, during the holidays, Amazon just hires
Yeah.
drivers,
Mhm.
and then those drivers will just take packages.
Yeah.
And just never show up the next day. And then,
But those are temp workers.
yeah, it's
We're going Sarah next.
Yeah.
Where?
Sarah.
This is Children Bible.
Mhm.
In the elementary.
Probably. It says 1 through 6.
Mm.
No, the wording is not elementary. Maybe fourth grade, third grade level.
that's not. How much do you know about Sumeria in context of the Bible?
It depends on what questions.
Because I'm taking this history class, and the professor was just kind of briefly talking about how Sumeria preceded, Judeo Christianity.
Maybe.
What's Samaria? Was that
Yes,
current day what?
the Fertile Crescent, the Euphrates, and the Tigris River.
In the Middle East?
Yeah, so I think current day Iraq or Iran,
Oh, okay.
but that's where life sprung out. And then, is that where the Garden of Eden was?
Nobody knows where it is actually. But yes. Yeah, because so the Garden of Eden was drowned along with everything else during the flood.
Mm.
So nobody really knows where it is. If it is anywhere still, it's underground because there would have been a whole bunch of mudslides and stuff that would have covered it.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. And in my mind, that was done on purpose so that we don't look back towards Eden. Rather, we look forward to like heaven Eden, the heaven paradise.
Is that stated in the Bible? Like, it's actually drowned, or we're
No, it's just normal
we're saying
reasoning.
since it completely
Yeah.
covered the earth.
Yeah. If you take
would have
yeah.
submerged, right?
if you take Noah's flood seriously, then Eden is buried under like tons of mud and stuff. And you have to remember this, like there's like a flaming sword that was like blocking the way to the entrance of that stuff. So some people say, well, so that's definitely an angel, the flaming sword. Okay, so if it does exist, it's under it's like in a cave, 6 miles underground or something, like barely findable, because it would have been, if there was like say a canopy or something like that with trees or whatever that like somehow protected it by God's miracle or something, it would have still been covered by all the water and then all the mud and then all the dead bodies that ended up there after everything dries up. So it's like, you can't find where it is like on regular like topography. You have to look underground if you're gonna try to find it.
Apparently, the Epic of Gilgamesh also has a story about a flood.
It does. Okay, so and this is the dumb part about it. So a lot of people who are even people who say they're Christian scholars, they don't really take the Bible. So there's a guy named Peter Enns who said the Bible, the Old Testament stuff, or like Adam story and stuff like that, it's not a literal story about this guy named Adam. He said so. There's people who claim to be Christian who also say things like, if the evolution is possible, and then sometime down the line, one primate became an Adam figure, and then that's where all this is rolling from. In which case, you have to ignore this idea of like death coming into the world through sin. So you have to ignore that first, and then secondly, Jesus Christ's his last Adam role is based on a primate. Like you have to sort of like shift all these things into a new paradigm where it doesn't make sense based on what the original authors were intending. You know what I mean? You have to put new interpretations in there. So
And that's a slippery slope.
very slippery slope, because then the resurrection becomes a metaphor instead of an actual like a bodily resurrection,
Right.
which is what the confession is saying. Yeah, it's a slippery slope towards like, because then the point is now, well, what's religion for? And then it's just there to make you feel better for death, right? Which is what the other religions say. Whereas Christianity is saying it's not about feelings, it's about fact. Like here's what's going to happen, you know, and this is what you're preparing against. It's for that day. So, but yeah, as far as like the you know history and stuff goes, yeah. So they ignore Adam and all that stuff being historic stuff. So even Noah's flood and all that stuff, they say whenever civilizations, you know, started, whenever history started, history means just like written record of like human, whenever written history, like, so when they say prehistory, that means like before written records. So they would say like oral traditions, but history just means like when like the written records were started. They say there was a whole bunch of people who borrowed from the flood story because they were so like, you could say, you know, I don't want to say barbaric. Primitive? No, not even primitive. Because like because their thinking was not as developed as our thinking. Like it was the only way they could make sense of the world that they lived in. Creation happened this way for them because it makes sense to them that creation happened this way. To which I go, no, I think if you take history seriously, people are getting dumber. Not, I mean, like, even 200 years ago, the kind of like, you know, people, I mean, not even 100, let's say 100 years ago, you know, people used to sit through sermons that were like an hour long, only 100 years ago. 150 years ago, 100, even like 200 years ago, during the Puritan, you know, like, people used to sit through 4-hour sermons, right? And then, like, right now, people can barely sit through like a 20-minute sermon without, you know, like, not understanding like what they're talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and there's another example. It's an interesting example. If you look at the stuff that was built back
Oh yeah,
then,
yeah, too, yeah.
it's amazing. It's the most craziest thing you've ever seen in your life. But what are you like? If you look at
made that David statue
Yeah.
when he was 17 or something.
not even that, but like architects in general.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I heard
The Roman road, that's like over 2,000 years old, and it's still
Yeah.
standing, still good.
Mm.
Concrete mix.
Yeah,
and then if you look at houses today, or you know structures today, it's just simple
Or paved
Yeah.
streets today.
cement.
They
Right.
get potholes
all right.
in a week.
You know that there's that Roman the water thing that carried the water from like the mountain, or, you know, yeah, the aqueduct, like. So the incline has to be a very steady incline, or otherwise the water would like overflow out of there. And it was like 0.2 point. It's like very minute degree,
Yeah.
you know, but it's like over miles that they did that. So it's like their engineering is, you know, you don't have that stuff like that today.
They were working with a string and a stone.
Right.
You know,
So I'm saying like it's
they don't have any
그때
lasers or.
there is no good 기계도 없었을 거 아니야.
no,
Yeah.
and that's the other thing too. They had what's known as analog computers. So we use digital computers right now based on like voltage and stuff. But the Romans had a this thing called an analog computer. I think it was the Romans, and they could tell you know, the when eclipses would happen, or like when the planets would like align to a certain whatever it is, because it had an analog gear working.
I think the pyramids were made to
Similarly, yeah.
look at the
Yeah.
constellations.
So I'm just saying, like, so yeah, they can say all that stuff they want to, like, oh yeah, the Gilgamesh. You know, back in, you know, so Noah is probably a Jewish version of like the Gilgamesh. They can say that if they want to, but that really is a very slippery slope, because once you start thinking in those terms, like nothing starts to make sense. Nothing, because then in order for things to make sense, you have to have some kind of order in the things that you're talking about. And once you start trying to appeal to like many. Well, which one is the right one? Which one is the one that actually is the original story or whatever it is? Right. And then that's where you have the slippery slope. Like, well, if everything's equally the same, then nothing is true, right? Because true means like it's the fact, not some, Does that make sense?
Not some metaphor.
Yeah. And as far as the Sumeria goes, like a lot of Christian archaeologists, they say the rise of civilization happened simultaneously at Egypt, like you could say Proto-China. Yeah, the Sumerians. Maybe even the Mayans. I'm not sure about the Mayans, but there was a south. And the writing styles were all similar as well. They were all when all these civilizations started like popping out of nowhere, they were all in forms of pictograms. You know what I mean? Well, why? If language develops, shouldn't there be some phonetics mixed in with there as well as like other non-pictographic language? But it's not. It's all of it starts with pictograms, cuneiforms. Even Proto-Hebrew. Like so it's like when the alphabet and stuff like that, right? We talk about the phonetic sounds and stuff like that. They got it from the Proto-Hebrew. I don't know if you guys know that. So like Aleph, that's the Hebrew, the first letter we get our A from. Beth, that's beta. Yeah, and they actually have symbols. So I forget all of them, but the second letter, Beit, I think, or maybe it's Aleph. One of them is like a cow. So if you get like, if you understand how the letters are put together, then you can figure out what the word kind of generally means just by understanding like what those pictures represent. Sort of like hieroglyphics, or Chinese characters, or cuneiforms. You know what I mean? And we'll talk about a little bit of this during Sunday because we're gonna be talking a little bit about the Tower of Babel now because it's on chapter 11. And if you take the Bible seriously, then you can make sense of the data that's provided to you in archaeology, because then you can actually forward a theory like, okay, it used to be one language, but God divided it. If that's the case, then how would that work out? How would it work itself out if you had a unified language and then all of a sudden people were unable to recognize each other's language because the grammar or whatever it is, like all of it just changed, like the word representation changed. Like how would that look? Well, you would have similar technologies trying to come up with a writing style for that, which is what you have, pictograms. Yeah, I'm not an expert on this, but if you read the stuff that those people are experts from, like if you read the ones that are actually like taking the Bible seriously, their stuff makes more sense than if you read the stuff that people are not Christians or don't take the Bible seriously. They try to come up with like forward their theories and stuff like that. Okay. So Sarah, when Abraham was 99 years old, God came to him and renewed his promise that Abraham would be the father of many nations. He gave Abraham and his wife Sarai new names, Abraham and Sarah. God said that Sarah would give birth to a son, and Abraham laughed at the idea, as his wife was 90 years old. Later, Abraham was sitting by his tent when three strangers approached. One of them was God, who told Abraham that a year later, Sarah would indeed give birth to a son. Just as God had promised, Sarah later gave birth to a boy whose name was Isaac, which means laughter. Sarah laughs. Coming out of their tent, Sarah overheard the stranger say that she would give birth to a son. Sarah laughed at the idea. Later, when her son was born, her disbelief turned to joy. Her son's name Isaac is a play on the Hebrew word meaning to laugh, because she laughed in a very like not condescending, but like, oh, that can't be kind of laugh. But then when she did have the son, she was like, oh, ha 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 ha, like I can't believe God actually, So yeah, Sarah laughs when she overhears the conversation, and that's the weird thing too. So Abraham laughs, but Sarah also laughs as well. But people only think Sarah laughed, but Abraham actually laughed also before. And the other thing is that God accuses Sarah. Hey, I heard you laugh. She's like, no, I didn't. It's a pretty funny thing because God's like, yes, you did.
속일 수 없어. 하나님을
Yeah.
속일 수
속일 수. You can't deceive God. Chapter 17, verse 4. This is my covenant with you. God makes a new covenant, a formal agreement with Abraham. He promises to watch over his children and then give them the land of Canaan. And again, this becomes very important because in the land of Canaan, God tells the Israelites to wipe them out, but they don't because so I think I mentioned this before. A lot of people go, why did God tell the Israelites to wipe all the Canaanites out? Well, the main reason was because they practiced idolatry, and God didn't want that infecting the minds of the Israelites. And then secondary reason is, and the secondary reason I just recently developed from the Reformed writings, and then just doing the research on Noah, like for the sermon and stuff, which is Noah cursed Canaan to be a servant of Shem, and in God's mind, it's like we have a choice. You can if they got rid of all the Canaanites, then Noah's curse would be suppressed. It wouldn't have occurred. But because God takes the words of the Father seriously, like he gave them a choice, and then they chose not to follow what God said, which is why then the curse of Noah overtook them, and then they failed as a nation. And we'll talk about that when we talk about first the Israelites making the Canaanite servants before as they're conquering the land. And then afterwards, even in Judges, they're still making people their servants. And then even during King Solomon's time, they're still turning the Canaanites into their servants instead of wiping them out. So just so we understand, it's not this one-time thing that they didn't do. It's they consistently kept turning them into slaves, even though God's commandment was get rid of them. Chapter 17, verse 15. Her name will be Sarah. Sarah, along with Abraham, is given a new name by God to highlight her status as an ancestor of God's chosen people, the Israelites. Both Sarai and Sarah mean princess in Hebrew.
밑에가 너무 재밌어요. God has appeared in human form.
So this is something theological, which is God the Father never appeared in human form. So whoever appeared here is the second person of the Trinity, appearing in human form.
Jesus?
Not Jesus, but the second person of the Trinity.
So the Son.
Yeah, so the Son
Not the Son.
appearing. Yeah, not Jesus though.
Okay.
Because God the Father never
Right.
appeared. We never saw God the Father.
It's not more because the Father, is more because spiritual and stuff.
It's because of the economy they play. So like what role? So they made a covenant within themselves. Like this is the role you're gonna play in history. And Jesus is always the one that appears visibly to us. So whenever somebody when Joshua goes to enter Canaan, he saw like the captain of God's army.
여호와의 군대 장관.
Right, but that's Jesus that he saw, or not Jesus, the Son that he saw, not the Father, not the Holy Spirit, because they're dedicated to a role.
Always Son you can see
Always.
as a human form.
Every Old Testament appearance of God is always
미리 예고를 한 거네.
Yeah. foreshadow.
그래서 이거를 근데 아브라함 know that they are God in human form.
He knows.
Or just serving.
He knows God is among the three people. So the third person, he knows one of them is the appearance of God. He knows that.
How does he know?
So I'm not trying to be racist here, but people look like a certain group of people. Do you know what I mean? Like if we were, let's say, in Asia, and some non-looking Asians came to you, not Asian-looking people came to you, and especially in a time when what people look like.
So he saw someone else
Yeah, like
that he has never seen before.
appearance of somebody he'd never seen before.
I didn't know that. I thought it was an angel.
Yeah, two of them were angels.
That's how I remember reading. All three of them.
So there were three of them, and then it said God's face was among them, and that means one of them was actually
I missed that.
face of God.
I always thought it was three angels.
Hmm?
너무 맛있게
Later.
드신다.
Oh, Abraham. No, where are you on? I think we're on Ishmael now. Any questions on Sarah?
자꾸 닦아주시죠.
Okay, okay.
기름이 자꾸 내려.
No, Sarah, I'm pretty familiar. Ishmael, I have no idea. Who is this guy?
He's an important character.
Oh,
Could you read it
is
for us,
it
please?
Ishmael?
Huh?
I've heard the name, but I know
Yeah.
nothing about
Second-
the person.
세컨 와이프, 와이프가 아니라
Oh,
슬레이브의
Hagar.
Oh,
하가.
Remember, Sarah's like,
yes.
I can't have a son,
Right,
so
right.
can you marry my servant instead from Egypt?
Yeah.
So he's more like Arabic, right? Kind of. That's
He's
the
the
argument?
father of all the
이슬람.
Arabs.
Arabs, right?
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I. Oh, okay, so I do remember that. I just don't know the name of Ishmael.
Can you read it out loud, please?
Ishmael, Genesis chapter 21. Ishmael was Abraham's first son, born to Hagar, Sarah's Egyptian slave girl. After Sarah gave birth to Isaac, she grew to dislike Ishmael. One day, Sarah found Ishmael making fun of Isaac. In a fury, she told Abraham to get rid of Ishmael and his mother. Abraham, who loved his first son, did not want to send him away, but God told Abraham to listen to Sarah, promising that he would protect Hagar and Ishmael. Abraham gave the pair some food and a skin full of water, and they went out to the desert.
Mhm.
Water in the desert. When the water they carried ran out, Hagar and Ishmael sat under a bush and wept. God heard them weeping and showed Hagar where to find the well. She filled the water skin and brought it to Ishmael to drink. Ishmael had 12 sons, each of whom founded their own tribe. Chapter 21, verse 13. I will make the son of the slave into a nation also. God promises Abraham that Ishmael will be the father of a nation in his own right. His children were the Ishmaelites, the desert people who lived east and south of Canaan. Many Arabs today trace their descent back to Ishmael.
No. Yeah, so what happened was Sarah couldn't have children because she was barren.
Mm.
So she said to Abraham, just sleep with my slave girl here, and then that'll be my son.
Mm.
So he did. I mean, it's more complicated than that, but I don't know what that green line is though.
야, 맛있어. 근데 아담은 왜 그렇게 했지?
We'll talk about when we get to Genesis, but Sarah was talking to Abraham like one of those things, like, you know, you have to do this, or I'm gonna hate you for the rest of my life. You know.
There's a conflict now. There's a huge conflict between Israel and the
Yeah.
Arab nations.
Mhm.
So
And this was the start of it.
was that the intent?
It was, so
What was
if
사람이 불순종해서 생긴.
yeah, so if Sarah listened to God and just waited it, then this would not have happened. But in her
oh, so this happened after she was promised the son.
Yeah.
She still
so she was
so
promised.
basically she didn't believe.
나.
Yeah, so Abraham was 75 when he was 75 when he was first promised a son. So Sarah was 65, and the longer the time went, God would become more and more specific with what His promise was concerning. And then Sarah at one point just couldn't take it anymore. She was like, "Just give me a son," you know, to Abraham.
So she was not patient.
Yeah.
Nor did she believe.
I mean, yeah, she didn't believe. Abraham believed, but she didn't believe. And for people who are alive, I'm not trying to be sexist here or anything, but for those that are married, you know what I'm talking about when I say, like, sometimes some wives, not every, but sometimes some wives get to a point where they're, it seems like they're almost threatening a divorce or something like that if they don't get their way in this one thing. And when you get to that situation, like, all husbands have felt this in their entire life, at least once in their married life, which is you have to give in, or it's like you can feel a big problem coming. And that was the moment that Abraham was like, if he stood his ground, we don't know what might have happened, but definitely Sarah would have been very upset. Very, very upset. So Abraham didn't stand his ground. He was like, okay.
Do they know when they're gonna have a child?
No.
It says later Abraham was sitting with a year later Sarah would indeed give birth to a son. Okay, it says that a year later.
When he was 99. But God first told him about the promise of a son when he was 75. And then it came to Abraham again, like towards when he was like 90 something. And then finally again.
That's a
What is it?
long time to wait for Sarah.
No, but that's the thing though.
I
Right.
don't understand.
Right. But so on the one hand, yeah, we can understand on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's because of that, the Arab nation was formed and they became a permanent enemy of Israel, or enemy against. And it was meant it didn't have to be this way, but once it was this way, God used that as a metaphor for the seed of the physical versus the promised seed. So Ishmaelites become the Israelites, or the Jews that persecute the seed of God in Jesus Christ. So it's like the Jews will, until the last days, constantly persecute the Christians. That's Paul's analysis of that.
I see.
So it didn't have to be this way, but once it did become this way, God turned it into a metaphor for, the physical people of God, the Jews, versus the spiritual, the children of the promise. Through Paul, it explained.
So how would God kind of feel if there was a modern day just genocide of non-Christians?
So every soul has the possibility to repent and then know God through Jesus Christ. So even one lost soul in God's mind is a bad thing. But that's not to say they don't deserve it. Because we always have to remember there's always two sides to here. One is our responsibility, and the other one is God's providence, or is a decree. And they always work simultaneously. So on the one hand, we can't say, why didn't God turn them into Christians? That's something we can't say. But at the same time, they are responsible for the choices they make. And if their choice is to reject God, that's a choice they made.
Because why is it so important, the time that you spend on earth, and whether you convert or
Yeah, so everybody,
or
so
not?
the reason why God created everybody was, or each individual was to glorify God in a particular way that he wants. From the beginning of time, that he wanted every individual to glorify God in their particular way. You know what I mean? So for instance, like God's plan with you is not the same as God's plan with me. And it never was. God already had a different plan. He wanted to be glorified through you, and then a different plan to be glorified through me.
So the kind of past genocides couldn't take place now.
It can take, it still can, but it wouldn't be God ordained genocide. Whereas back then it would have been, because the word of God hasn't been fulfilled yet. And
Word of God meaning Jesus.
word of God meaning the New Testament. Yeah, so Jesus, yeah. It was, so until Jesus came, there had to be a warning that the judgment day was coming. And there had to be some sort of a physical manifestation of an example, like this is what the judgment of God looks like. One was the flood. Another wasn't, like, another was Israel, like wiping out Canaan, which they didn't do. Another would be Babylon wiping out Israel for their idolatry. You know what I mean? So in each of these cases, what God is showing is there is a judgment day, and everybody's gonna be held accountable for that day, both corporately and individually. But when Jesus Christ came, all of that was fulfilled. So now the only thing that's left is, so God doesn't have to show any more in those ways. Does that mean? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the only thing, so now like the only thing is like if there's like an earthquake, that should wake us up to say, okay, that's actually a sign of the judgment of God. or like an animal mauls somebody, right? Well, these animals should have been domesticated already, but people love animals more than they love God, so they don't, right? So we look at that and we go, we're so far removed from like how we're supposed to live that we're not domesticating these animals like we're supposed to be. So, for instance, we can't eat dogs in America. You can't eat cows in India.
Cow is the god
In India, yeah. But that's supposed to show us that we're so far removed from like how we're supposed to be living, which is we're supposed to have these animals all domesticated, and we do that through eating the animals.
Rule them, right? We have to rule.
Yeah,
them.
you're supposed. It's not like a suggestion. God said you have to rule over them. You have to have dominion over them because it was a covenant blessing commandment. You see, he didn't say, "I hope you're fruitful and multiply." He says, "Be fruitful and multiply." It was a commandment. So God doesn't command genocides anymore. But when people die, it's supposed to point us back to the judgment day of God that's coming. So if you look at the New Testament, there's like a pillar in Siloam that fell and killed like 18 people. And people are like, oh, what sins did they commit to deserve this? And Jesus is like, this is what's waiting for like everybody, is what he said. So everybody should look at this and say, we need to repent. Because this one particular event shows the judgment of God near.
So if we worship the creation, that's the 그게 안 좋아.
Oh, it's not.
이렇게 돼가고 있는 게 이제 심판이 judgment가 다가온다는 거죠.
Right.
So,
Because we're moving. So for instance, like the vegan movement, like the more that progresses, that means like the more judgment day is coming, because that means we're moving farther and farther away from like the way we're supposed to be living, or vegetarianism.
그 부모를 공경하지 않고 뭐
Yeah.
이런 거 다
Yeah.
자기를
So-
사랑하며 요즘 자기를 사랑하는 사람 많잖아요.
Yeah.
그래서 한국 K-팝도 유명한 게 I love my body.
Hmm.
라는 노래가 나왔어.
Right. No, but that's because the Christians play along with that because they say they say stupid things like you have to love yourself before you can love your neighbor. No, that's not the way it works. You have to love God's. You have to first recognize that everybody's made in God's image. That's the first thing you have to recognize, and then you have to say, okay, like it's not that you love yourself. You love the image that you're bearing concerning God, and then from that is how you love your neighbor. So there's like this order here, but Christians sort of like skip,
That part. Just love.
yeah, love yourself is how they try to.
Even though sinners
Yeah.
something 있잖아요.
Yeah.
많이 있는데.
So-
oftentimes you do 1-2 hours of volunteering at a soup kitchen, and you feel way better after that than spending like a
Sure.
self-care day and
Yeah.
feeding yourself.
And the idea is you're not loving yourself. So when Jesus says love your enemies love your neighbors as you love yourself, he's not talking about like, the secular kind of love. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about you're an image of God. So you have to live as that kind of image, and then the same way you consider yourself as image of God, you have to consider the other person as image of God as well. That's what he's talking about. Not this like, love my body, love myself. What is it? It's I remember the joy. Somebody was like, the Christian joy is love Jesus, love others, love yourself. I was like, no, that's not what it's talking about.
It looks hearing very
isn't
good.
Wait, the way I learned it is you love others because God has loved you, right?
No, you love. So okay, yes, God has loved you.
God has shown you what love is.
Yes, and you're reflecting that.
So you can now show what that is to other people.
I mean, yes and no. God has loved you because you're His image bearer,
Right.
not because. So, for instance, like, in other words, we're saved, right? And it's that,
Which is grace.
yeah, and it's that kind of love God is talking about,
Right.
because there's a different kind of love where
Yeah. The secular.
they're not
love.
saved.
It's like love your bodies.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, so it has to deal with the fact that we're image bearers of God. That's where God loves us with the love that He loves us. Is He doesn't love like a dog the same way He loves us. He loves human beings because a dog is not made in God's image.
Yeah.
So same as angels. God doesn't love angels the
As
way
much
he,
as-
yeah, not just as much. The quality of it is different. It's a different kind of love for human beings because we're made in God's
Oh.
image.
So
Yeah.
that's why angel jealous us, right? 뭐,
I don't really
흠모라
buy
그래.
into that, but
흠모한다 그래서
어.
우리를 부러워한다.
yeah. In the Bible, yeah.
영어로 뭐라고
Yeah, kind of like, not jealous, but like,
Envy,
envious.
but-
yeah.
But it's a
Because different
it's a
status.
strong
Yeah.
word.
And it's
Envy is a strong
intellectual, yeah.
word.
Because the angels don't have feelings like we have feelings. They have, because we don't have a body. They're spirits, so their envy is intellectual. It's only thought way.
That we are perfectly God's image than the other creatures.
Yeah, so we're both intellect and this physical, tangible, physical body united together inseparably. Supposed to be, but sin separated. So yeah, and I keep want to focus on God loves us as image bearers. So when Jesus says, "Love your neighbor as you love yourself," he's not saying it apart from the image bearing concept. He's saying you're an image bearer of God, and if you're saved, if you understand God's grace because you're saved, then it's with that kind of love that you are given that you're supposed to love others, which is image bearing love. That's what it is. Because you're made in God's image, that's how you're supposed to love the others.
사랑할 수 없는 사람 만났을 때 기도해야 될 것 같아.
기도도 하고, and you're always supposed to remember no matter how hateful they are, they're still made in God's image. That's the point. So maybe this here's like an extreme example.
Even like dictators.
Yeah, so here's an extreme example. So the Hitler. Everybody's like, oh, Hitler killed so many people. It's like, yeah. So
Stalin was much worse.
or yeah, not even Stalin, Mao, yeah.
Mao
right?
was-
Like 50 million or 80 million, something like that. It was high. Yeah, it was
Stalin, the
true.
Great Purge.
Yeah. So the question is, you go, well,
Extreme.
yeah, are you supposed to love Stalin too? Well, when it comes to the gospel, yes, you have to. So if
There's
you're-
fury.
Yeah, if you're given an opportunity to preach to Stalin, you should.
Mm.
So he has a chance to get to heaven. That's the point, right? You don't want to be like, oh, you just killed too many people. I'm not going to preach to. I don't want you to know who Jesus Christ is. That's not love, right? So even
요나가 그랬잖아.
right, yeah, like Jonah, who's like, oh, Nineveh's our enemies. I don't want to go tell them repent,
Right.
right? Even though the will of God was go there and tell them they're gonna die.
It's surprising that they repented.
Yeah. So anytime God speaks to anybody, even if it's a curse, even when God curses somebody, that speech is a gracious speech. And it can always, because it's a gracious speech, it's always a good thing. And good things can come out if you take what God is saying seriously. Always. There's no case where God says something and it's not gracious.
말안 듣는 사람은 혼내는 것처럼.
So I learned something. So I don't know. This could be controversial, but let's just make it generic.
Right.
Dictator that you hate
Right.
so much.
Right.
That killed many, many people.
Right.
Millions and millions of people. If God so chooses,
Mhm.
he can be in heaven, right?
Yes.
And we don't have the right to complain because it's not up to us to decide that,
Yeah. So
right?
let me put it.
That's
Yeah.
not
Let's try to put it this way. So let's say we caught Hitler, or let's say we caught Mao. We actually have the full legal right, not legal right, based on the image of God, right to execute him.
Huh?
So we have the full image of God right to execute him
If we catch him.
if we catch him.
Okay, back in the day. Okay.
Yeah. So if we were there and we were able to kill this guy, we could,
Hmm.
and that's because God commanded Noah and his progeny, if you kill somebody, that person must be killed as well, because we're made in God's image. So the justification for why a murderer needs to be murdered as well is because they're made in God's image.
Okay.
Yeah. So if we caught Mao, then yeah, we can actually kill him. And it's called corporal punishment,
All right.
or is it capital punishment? Capital
Yes,
punishment.
yes.
Corporal is something like spanking or something.
Right.
Yeah, capital punishment.
Yeah.
So while we're killing him, though, we can't be like, we're going to deny you the gospel. That's something we're not allowed to do. So even as we execute him, we have to let him know, okay, you still have an opportunity to receive the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Okay, so in other words, you cannot deny that.
Yeah, because that's the right of every image bearer to understand or know, to be told, at least know that the gospel is available.
So is that why, like in prison,
I mean, that's what prison ministry is about.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
Because even the worst pedophile, because he's made in God's image, not because this is where we come back to love your neighbors as yourself. It's not because we have this secular love for the guy. We're presenting him the gospel. It's he's made in God's image, so that's why he has the right to know who his God is, which is why then we must present the gospel as Christians. We have to present the gospel to them, even as we electrocute them or whatever we do, lethal injection, hanging, whatever it is we're doing, shooting squad, whatever it is. Yes, they deserve the consequence of their sin. They deserve the consequence of their crime. But at the same time, we're not allowed to deny them the gospel, because we're commanded to love even our enemies, and it's not love them secularly. It's talking about as image of God. We're supposed to love them as image of God. Does that make sense?
이미지 오브 갓이 어글리 된 거죠. 그 사람들
It's
찌그러지고
corrupt, yes.
corrupt 된 거죠.
Every sinner, and then in Jesus Christ is restored, or it's began a perfect restoration, and then in heaven it's fully restored.
여기 이미지 their perfectly image of God을 생각하면서
사랑해야 된다, right? So that's why you can't deny them the gospel, because if they're made in God's image, then they have the right to know who their God is. Not because of us, but because of God.
we do have responsibility.
Yeah, so because they kill people or rape somebody or whatever, then yeah, we actually have the responsibility to hold them accountable. But we don't have the right to deny them the gospel. We can't just be like, you're gonna go to hell and like execute them. We don't have the right to do that. We have the right to capital punishment them, but the gospel can't be denied from them. And that's in any case. So
that's our calling to.
It's not just our calling. It's the commandment of Jesus Christ to love our neighbors as ourselves. And whatever we would that they would do unto us, we do to them. And it's not secular. It's not something like, well, I want them to strip naked in front of me, and that's not what it's talking about. It's talking about, like in terms of justice, things that you don't want unfair things to happen to you. That's what it's getting at.
unfair thing이 해픈하고 있을 때는 그럼 어떻게 해요?
Yeah, but we need to treat. So even if they're treating us unfairly, the way we treat them is we don't want to be treated unfairly. So we don't treat them unfairly, even though they treat us unfairly.
That's why there was a shooting incident in a church, and a lot of people died, but the family forgave that person.
And actually, if there's a gunman or whoever it is, like we have the full right to shoot the guy.
Yeah.
For self-defense, not only, but
right. So he's probably gonna get get capital punishment, but the family
forgave them. They have to, right?
Because they're Christians.
Right. Because they're commanded to love them.
못할 수도 있잖아. 자기가 너무 힘들어서.
Right, 힘들어서, but that assumes that our forgiveness and all these things belong to us.
Right.
But they don't. They belong to God first, and He gave us these things to glorify Him with.
But it's also being free, because if you harbor the hate, you can become
a slave to it, basically.
That's hard.
Slave to what?
The hate.
We slave to hate.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Really hard.
That also lose to us.
Right.
It's not always a conscious thing though. Feeling not being able to forgive someone.
Yeah, and we're not talking about, we're not perfect Christians here. Not everyone's in a situation like that. Like we're not gonna all be perfect Christians.
No,
and
100%.
The thing is, that's our goal. And then how do we work towards that is the question. How do we work, in our lives, in the small things and the big things? Like how do we work towards that goal? That's what we're constantly dealing with. Because we're not perfect. So sometime along the line, we're gonna be like, flip the guy, like F him, I don't care about this guy, like get out of here, right? But
For sure.
and that's perfectly, not that it's okay, but that's perfectly human to do that. So then we can't get stuck on that and be like, oh, I can't believe, move on, move on, and then do better. Yeah, do better next time. You got.
Ignore 하면 어때?
Yeah.
Ignore is not good way.
Yeah, not just ignore, but we have to be better people. We have to be the light and salt of the earth. Right, that's the point. Yeah.
Ignore is like the secular people is
Kind of,
we
yeah.
are same as like the secular people.
It's almost impossible to ignore
Right.
it though.
Right.
It's, when you're so angry at
thanks.
somebody,
Right.
you cannot ignore.
Right.
I don't know how that's possible. Is it possible to ignore?
No.
I don't think so.
세상 사람들이 이그노를 하는 것 같은데.
Thanks for joining.
No, you can ignore like